Welcome back to the City Current Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference and powering the good. And you are in for a treat. We are honored to have our good friend, Bill Courtney. He is the coach from the Oscar-winning documentary Undefeated. He's also the author of Against the Grain, which I have right here with me. And it is a coach's wisdom on character, faith, family, and love. And he's also the president and CEO of Classic American Hardwoods. So he has a lot on his plate. We'll talk about movies, we'll talk about second books, and so much more. But Bill, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm great. And I want to take you on the road with me because it doesn't get any better introduction than that, my friend.
Hey, I'll be your wingman any day of the week. I'll be your hype man. So you do so much good. And when you talk about being able to share your story and the lessons that you've learned, you're doing a ton of public speaking, and we'll talk about that. And really just remarkable in terms of your heart for serving and serving others and making a difference. And all of that obviously put on display with this documentary, Academy Award-winning, Oscar-winning, documentary Undefeated. How do you, in a snapshot, just for context, share a little bit of that story, which then leads into the book and the public speaking and everything you're doing? Give us a little bit of your backstory, if you will.
I'm a Memphis guy, born and bred. Dad left home when I was 4. I've had, in addition to him, 4 stepfathers, and didn't come from the right side of the tracks. And despite all of that, I've been very blessed to have been surrounded by some good grandparents and some really good coaches. And the truth is, I've been blessed beyond measure. I have a business that's going to do 60, 70, $80 million in sales, 130 employees, and all this stuff has happened in my life. And so as a function of the success and blessings that have been bestowed upon me, I don't think service and giving back is a nice thing to do. I think it's a requirement of what's been given to you. And so my approach to service and my approach to giving back and my approach to all of that is it's just a prerequisite of the success that has befallen me.
Give a little bit of the context around Undefeated, where you're able to step in and really transform not just the football program, but the lives of these young men. And you see on display a lot of the brutal truths that these kids are going through. And you learn a tremendous amount, especially around leadership and getting through to people and building trust as a part of that. So give a little bit of that storyline.
I didn't go to Manassas to save anybody. I went there to coach football. And I coached the kids at Manassas no differently than I coached the kids at St. George's or ECS or Rosemark or Oxford or any other places I've coached. Our goal was to not only teach football, but teach fundamental tenets of civility and character and selflessness and teamwork and commitment, and just teach those fundamentals and tenets along with the game of football, and then hopefully give the kids an illustration of when you employ those tenets in your life, these are the successes that can come to you by that way. And so we didn't go to save anybody. We just went to coach football and teach the stuff that your grandmother taught you, and hopefully illustrate those tenets of the way we interacted with the kids. And then the kids could make a decision to employ those tenets in their lives and do things for themselves. Pretty paternalistic to say, as a white guy, you go to an all black place and go save the poor black kids. It was not it. I went to coach football, and any success that those kids have had in their lives since then are a tribute to their hard work. And if I can claim anything, it's that I introduced to them tenets and fundamentals and illustrated to them how they work in your life for good. And some of the kids listened to that and employed them and have had some success in their life. So I didn't save anybody. If anybody saved anybody, they saved themselves. All we did was teach the basics and illustrate how those basics work.
Something that you talk about in your speeches, and I'll never forget on my end, and I've heard you say it, many times, and to me, it always resonates, is the turkey person. And when you look at doing things for the right reason and making the commitment, the importance of continually showing up, not just when, it's convenient, but continually showing up.
Yeah,
Give a little bit of that story.
Well, I don't think we have time to do the whole story, but
Yeah.
I will just say, read it, look it up on the internet, read it in the book. But the moral of the story is motive matters. If you want the leadership position because you like the corner office, if you want the leadership position because you like people slapping you on the back, if you want the leadership position where you have opportunities to serve, but you like seeing your name in the headlines, if you take leadership positions in business or society or sports or family because you like the way it makes you feel, you're motivated by the wrong thing. And while people will always say yes or no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, because you occupy that position, the minute you turn around and walk away, they're going to stare darts through your back because they know you're a fraud. True leadership starts with service and servant leadership. And if you take leadership positions with the goal and the motive to actually serve and elevate those around you, and you do it for the simple edification of another human being, then you are being a true servant leader. And a true servant leader is motivated by the right things, and then you can inspire change and success. And so that's what the turkey person story illustrates. So now you have the moral to the story. Now your listeners and viewers will have to go look up the story to understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. Go read the book.
Read the book.
So, Against the Grain is the book, and give us maybe one of your favorite moments thus far when you talk about writing the book and everything that it's led to. Give us one of your favorite moments tied to the book.
Well, it's led to a bunch of speeches all over the place, and probably one of my favorite is I spoke to the United States Olympic team before they went off to the Olympics, and the Paralympics were there. And I got to meet a young lady named Katie Holloway, who grew up in California and ended up being the sixth man of the year on her girls basketball team in college, averaged 10 points, 10 rebounds, and she did it with one leg. And she actually wore a knee brace over her prosthetic because she never wanted anybody to know she was born with one leg. And she never uses a crutch. And I'm not talking about in Olympic stuff. I'm talking about like in straight up basketball. And now she's a gold medalist in the Paralympics. And the opportunity that Undefeated and then the book has afforded me to go around the country and speak and meet people, to meet unbelievably inspiring people like her and many others has been probably the payoff, as well as, I've got a business here in Memphis and I make my living doing this. All this other stuff is for fun. And yeah, there's some money involved in it, but I don't have to have it. And so I get to go around talking about real stuff. I get to talk about politics and race and creed, which it's high time we quit worrying about everything people might think about us. We need to have conversations about that stuff that matters. And ultimately what you find is we're all really connected by threads that are very similar. Sometimes our belief in policy or how we approach a certain thing may differ, but in general, we all just want to be safe and happy and sound and prosperous, and to be able to go across the country in many different racial, political, and societal groups and talk about stuff that matters and have real conversations has been incredibly rewarding. I gave a speech in DC to the Heritage Foundation, which is as right as you get. And that evening, I gave a speech to a correspondence dinner for the press, which is pretty left. I gave the same speech, the exact same speech to two, and I got standing ovations at both. And that should tell you, despite our differences, how so closely we really do agree with the basics. It's just how to get there that we differ. And if you're civil and you break down all the noise, I still have a renewed belief that there's a lot of common ground we can still find if we just have civility and employ these tenets and basics in our lives and how we approach each other.
What's something that when you look back on the book has changed you for the better, either the way you look at things, kind of the soul searching aspect? Is there something that as you kind of look back on the book, it really did kind of shift the way that you look forward and have kind of carried forward?
There's no doubt that when you're driving around Memphis and you're driving around 240, there's a few exits that you pass that are the exits you don't want to have a flat tire late at night. Let's call it Warford would be one. And oftentimes when you go over that overpass and you peer over the side of Warford and you see the despair and the dysfunction and the disenfranchisement, you often think to yourselves, gosh, that's terrible down there. Somebody ought to do something about that. And my question is, who's somebody? My suggestion would be you cock that rearview mirror about 20 degrees and look yourself in the face, because the government has proven woefully inadequate in figuring out these problems. And what I've learned is that there's nothing that replaces true servant leadership, boots on the ground, care and concern, work. And if you think, well, somebody to do something about that, if you actually think your caring notion without any action matters, you're a fool. We got to quit saying somebody ought to do something about that. We got to quit relying on the government to fix all the problems, and we need to get involved and take action in our communities and those of us who have been fortunate enough to have some level of success in our lives. Again, I think we're required to share that success in a way that is motivated by the right reasons, and there's an opportunity then for growth.
Talk about the second book. You're working on your second book now, and you're also executive producing 2 films. So talk about some of these next chapters, so to speak.
The second book the premise is this. It's a parenting book written chapter for chapter for my view on a particular parental technique and my children's view on that same technique and how it worked or did not work for them. In other words, what I did for this particular situation, or what Lisa and I did, and then our children's response to it. And it's really interesting because some of the things I thought we did really well that worked, didn't. And some things that I thought missed, worked. And so it's an interesting look at parenting techniques and then measuring against the children's response to them in a very real way. Interesting. I think it's also pretty funny, and it's humbling as hell.
Yeah.
With regard to the movies, Against the Grain has been picked up, and I'm an executive producer on that, and it's in development now. The script has been written twice. It's being written again, and then there's a second project about, believe it or not, a soccer team full of Hispanics, most of whom were non-documented in Georgia, who turned an entire school and life around through the success on their soccer team, and how this very split Georgian small city with a bunch of white middle to wealthy class people, and then these whole group of non-documented immigrants, Hispanics, and this soccer team brings this community together. And 10 years later, these Hispanics are now driving pickup trucks and hunting with a lot of the people from that neighborhood who are now learning to speak Spanish, and how this soccer team and these kids on the soccer team brought this entire community together, and they understand each other. And it's a really beautiful story. So that's in development. And so there's the book and the two movies we're working on.
How does that tie into the evolution for you as a speaker, a keynote speaker, over the years, being able to go from sharing the Undefeated storyline then to Against the Grain in the book, and now the things that you're working on now? How does all that tie into your keynotes today?
It all is based, every speech I do is still based around, I do 3-part speeches. So there are always 3 pieces of 15 to 20 tenets that I talk about all the time. But originally the anecdotal metaphorical stories were always having to do with Undefeated in football. And then they branched out to not just Undefeated in football, but some things in my book, in business. And now I am branching out into more societal and even socio-political venues that are maybe a little larger footprint. Again, I get to talk about race and politics and creed and color and all of that. And so a few years ago, I just kind of started broadening the things that we were willing to kind of put ourselves out there about, but I always tie it back to the fundamentals and tenets that started this whole journey for me. And the idea is to have a narrative that metaphorically you can show how these tenets work to hopefully diffuse so much of the vitriol around the division that we feel right now, which I think is really unnecessary. And I think our leaders are doing a really poor job of using these tenets and civility in the way they're interacting with each other. And then you tag social media on it, where any jerk can sit behind a keyboard and say anything they want to. And it creates this powder keg of division. And I think we can be a forward-thinking, progressive society without abandoning the core principles that got us here in the first place. And so I'm talking about how we use those tenets and core principles along with growth and societal evolution, and not lose who we are as a united people.
For you as president and CEO of Classic American Hardwoods, what have you learned going through the pandemic with your team? As you mentioned, 130 employees. And when you talk about supply chain and manufacturing and COVID and the spikes, like, it's been a roller coaster ride. So what have you learned in that role as president and CEO of running this business through this pandemic?
It doesn't matter if you're a $13 an hour common laborer all the way up to an executive. You want to work in a place that cares about you, that you feel appreciated. You want to be able to work every day. You don't want to have people breathing down your neck, and you don't want society and politics to interrupt your livelihood. We have, for instance, 93% of our people are double vaxxed and boosted. I never once, not one time, did I say you have to be, and despite what Biden's ill-thought proclamation was that got shot down in the Supreme Court, you know, I'm really not Democrat or Republican, so I'll take shots at both sides, but that was dumb. You can't force people into those kind of decisions, but what you can do is you can educate them. And so we had lots of meetings around here, and I'm saying the executive right next to $12 an hour guy all together. We talked about the science of it. We talked about the risk. We talked about everything. And I trusted all of my employees to be adults and make the best decision for them and their family. But we also talked about, you may be 24 and healthy, but you've got a 65-year-old aunt you live with, and how responsible it is for you to go kill her if you get sick and give it to her. And so we talked about that. And so then it was a problem for my employees to get off. And so I brought in a company, and we had vaccination events at this place. And we've had 4 of them so far. And so over the last 7 months, we've had real conversations, no force, no judgment. Here are the facts, here are the things to think about, and then provided the vaccine for anybody who wanted it. And 93% of my company is vaccinated. And I can't find anybody to say that 93% of anybody agrees to do anything. And it's a direct result, not of forcing you or mandating you or telling you what you're going to do or losing your job. It's a direct result of leadership, service, communication, education, civility, and an openness to have a conversation. And so I guess in answer to your question, what I've learned is treat human beings with respect, regardless of their station in life. Treat them civilly and trust them to have a brain and maturity, and give them the facts and be decent. And again, more times than not, you all end up on the same page when you make that approach.
Before we wrap up with contact information and website, where to go to learn more, give us some words of encouragement. We're still early in 2022. So when you look at the year ahead and making it the best year possible, what are some words of encouragement?
Kimmons Wilson, before he passed, I was invited to go to lunch with him one-on-one. And that was a real special thing for me because, you know, the founder of Holiday Inns, a Memphis icon. So we're sitting at lunch and literally we're at Wilson Air, which is their FBO, and his Learjet's sitting 20 steps from us. And we were talking and he said something and we were talking about success. And he said, you know, to be successful, you only have to work half a day. And I thought, I'm in his FBO. This guy built and sold Holiday Inns. His Learjet's sitting out here and he's telling me you'll have to work half a day. I'm like, great. Tell me about that half a day. He said, yeah, it doesn't matter if it's the first 12 hours or the second 12 hours. Just work half a day. And I think when it all comes down to it, if you employ basic fundamentals and tenets of character and commitment, integrity and honesty and teamwork and civility, and then you're willing to dive in and commit and put in the work. You know, the government says 40 hours is an average work week. Well, don't expect to be exceptional if you're only willing to put in average. And I think if you're willing to put in the exceptional effort at whatever endeavor you're involved in and employ these fundamentals in your life as absolutes, I think any of us can find success.
Yeah, good stuff. I love it. So wrap up with website. You're on social media. As I mentioned, I follow you in all your efforts.
Yeah, all the social medias at coachbillcourtney.com. Website is www.billcourtney.com or coachbillcourtney.com. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all that stuff. And I've got a blog that's on my website that also is printed on the social media stuff. So visit, and more to come. And it's also updated with where my speeches are and where I'm going to be next. So y'all check it out.
Absolutely. Well, definitely encourage everyone, get the book Against the Grain. Can't wait for the second book and the movies and everything else you're working on, but definitely love everything you're doing, Bill. So thank you for all you do and for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thanks for all you do. And you do a really good job with your platform, and I appreciate you having me.